My name is Ibrahim Traoré, and today I am here to unveil the ugly truth behind the pharmaceutical companies. Yes, you heard me correctly. I am the young military leader many of you label as radical. You portray me as anti-Western, even demonize me as a dictator. But today, I speak the truth, and this time, you won't be able to silence me. This time, your microphones won't be switched off. This time, your cameras won't be turned away. This time, your editors cannot cut or distort my words because the world as you know it, the world you control through your media empires, is changing. Millions will listen to this message, bypassing your filters, free from your manipulations, and untouched by your lies. I am 34 years old. Every single day of my life, I was surrounded by your falsehoods. When I was a child, I watched the television and saw Africa shown in one way and one way only. The images were always the same. Children suffering from illness, rampant diseases, death everywhere. That is Africa, they told us. This is the reality of Africa, they insisted. And we believed it. We were ashamed of our lands, ashamed of our people, ashamed of our continent. But then I grew older. I began to read. I questioned what I had been told. I sought answers. And gradually, I understood that the Africa you showed us on television was not the real Africa. The story you spun was a lie. A script you wrote and rewrote for years to justify your domination and exploitation. Let me share a true story with you. In 2021, I visited a small village called Dori located in northeastern Burkina Faso. At that time, I was still a young military officer. I had gone there to listen to the people's problems, to try and understand their needs firsthand. That morning, in the village square, I saw an 8-year-old girl named Aminata. She was sitting in a wheelchair, unable to move her legs. I asked the village leader what had happened to her. He replied quietly, "We don't know, sir. She was perfectly healthy 6 months ago." That day, I spoke with 47 children in that village, 47 children who were all suffering from the same condition, paralysis. And every one of their stories started at the same time. In March 2021, I began to investigate. I examined their health records carefully. One detail stood out. All these children had taken part in a special vaccine program during that period. 2 weeks later, I discovered the truth. It was an experimental malaria vaccine program run by GlaxoSmithKline. That moment, everything became clear. Every morning when I turned on CNN or watched the BBC or read the New York Times, I saw the same images repeated. Hungry children, war zones, epidemics, death. But I never saw stories about success, about progress. Africa was presented as a bleak, single-colored film strip, a place of only pain, despair, and death. The people living there were portrayed as one-dimensional, mere statistics in a tragedy. It was as if Africa was just a stain on the world map, a place waiting to be saved by aid. Every hour, every minute, the same story played on your screens: disease, epidemic, incurable viruses, children dying. These are the only words your media seems to associate with Africa. There is no room for hope, no room for progress, no room for pride or victory. So I ask you, Pfizer, Novartis, GlaxoSmithKline, Johnson & Johnson, Merck, have you ever made headlines for your successes in Africa? How many times have you broadcast your polio vaccine trials in Nigeria? How often have you shared the results of your HIV drug tests in Uganda? How many stories have you told about your malaria vaccine experiments in Malawi? Or your antiretroviral drug trials in Kenya? The answer is none. Because those stories don't fit your script. Your Africa cannot succeed because success would challenge the justification for your exploitation. But the stories I am telling you now don't fit your script either. Because these stories are real. I am giving you numbers. Real numbers that you hide. Every year, hundreds of thousands of African children are enrolled in experimental drug trials. 18% of them suffer permanent damage. 7% of them die. Your media calls this medical aid. Let me tell you the details you hide from the world. In 2016, Pfizer conducted an experimental meningitis vaccine trial on 200 children in Kano State, Nigeria. 11 children died. 189 suffered permanent brain damage. Pfizer paid $2 million in compensation. But no one in the company's leadership was ever held accountable. Albert Bourla once held the position of research director overseeing critical vaccine trials. Today, he stands as the CEO of the very corporation that conducted some of the most controversial and tragic medical experiments across Africa. Over the years, he has been rewarded with promotions and prestigious awards, a testament not to humanitarian success, but to corporate accomplishment within a system built on exploitation and disregard for human life. In 2019, under his leadership, the GlaxoSmithKline RTSS malaria vaccine trial in Malawi involved a staggering 720,000 children. This massive trial, touted as a step forward in combating malaria, resulted in devastating outcomes. Instead of saving lives, the death rate among vaccinated children rose sharply. Cases of paralysis skyrocketed to 340. When these alarming statistics surfaced, Emma Walmsley, a high-ranking executive within the pharmaceutical industry, dismissively referred to these tragedies as acceptable side effects. Among the victims was Aminata, a young girl paralyzed by the consequences of this experimental vaccine. Then in 2020, the world faced the COVID-19 pandemic, and pharmaceutical companies rushed to conduct vaccine trials worldwide. Johnson & Johnson launched a Phase 3 trial in South Africa, enrolling 44,000 participants. The trial was marred by tragedy. 267 individuals died from vaccine-related side effects. In response, Johnson & Johnson issued a cold statement claiming these deaths were statistically normal, reducing the loss of hundreds of human lives to mere numbers in a report. The following year, in 2021, a secret study conducted in Ghana investigated the effects of mRNA vaccine technology on the 15,000 children. The study revealed a shocking 340% increase in heart problems among those vaccinated. Despite the severity of these findings, the report was deliberately suppressed. Not a single major newspaper published these results, leaving the public unaware of the hidden dangers lurking behind the promise of vaccines. And this is only the visible portion of the crisis, the tip of a much larger and more sinister iceberg. What remains invisible to the public eye is a sprawling system of control and exploitation operating quietly in the background. While cameras focus on images of suffering, swollen bellies, disease outbreaks, and epidemics, a well-oiled mechanism functions relentlessly behind the scenes. Every day, vast quantities of blood, DNA, and tissue samples are collected from African populations and exported abroad for research and development. This biological resource extraction fuels the global pharmaceutical industry, often without informed consent or fair compensation. How does this system maintain its power? The first step is buying off leadership. Let me give you the real names behind this manipulation. Take Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, the current Director General of the World Health Organization. His story is riddled with controversy. As Ethiopia's health minister, he was accused of covering up a cholera outbreak in 2016, reframing it as acute, watery diarrhea, to protect the country's tourism industry. When he ran for the top position at WHO in 2017, he received a $50 million campaign boost from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, funding that secured his victory. Today, Dr. Tedros rubber stamps major pharmaceutical decisions affecting Africa. He was the first to grant emergency use authorization to Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine and approved Moderna's clinical trials across the continent. He has repeatedly downplayed the scandals involving Johnson & Johnson vaccines, and yet, he claims to be the guardian of Africa's health interests, a claim starkly contradicted by his actions. The second step is seizing control of Africa's health institutions. Take the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Africa CDC, as an example. While it is promoted as Africa's own health institution, the reality reveals a different story. In 2022, the Africa CDC had a budget of $800 million, but over 70% of that funding, roughly $584 million, came directly from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. This means the Gates Foundation essentially decides which vaccines are approved, which drugs are banned, and which treatment protocols are implemented. The director of Africa CDC, Dr. John Nkengasong, a former employee of the US CDC, lives in Addis Ababa, but is funded and controlled by the Gates Foundation. When South Africa tried to develop its own affordable COVID-19 vaccine in 2021, Dr. Nkengasong deemed it unsafe and refused approval, while simultaneously endorsing the expensive Pfizer vaccine. This is no coincidence. African health decisions are increasingly dictated from Seattle, not from within the continent. The third step in this exploitative system is media manipulation. The media controls the narrative, painting Africa as a continent perpetually trapped in sickness and despair, dependent on Western aid. Stories of corporate greed, medical malpractice, and exploitation are deliberately silenced. Meanwhile, the public is bombarded with images of suffering, reinforcing harmful stereotypes and justifying continued foreign intervention. Behind the scenes, millions of African lives are sacrificed on the altar of pharmaceutical profits. The consequences are profound: children paralyzed or dead, entire communities betrayed, and a continent's health sovereignty stripped away. Yet, these facts remain buried beneath carefully crafted corporate and political narratives. This system is a direct assault on Africa's dignity, its health, and its future. But by exposing these truths, by naming names and revealing mechanisms, we can begin to break the chains of silence and demand accountability. In 2022, the New York Times reported a staggering figure: its advertising revenue reached hundreds of millions of dollars. Yet, beneath this impressive headline lies a troubling reality about the sources behind this immense wealth. The single largest advertiser for the New York Times that year was Pfizer, whose advertising budget alone was an eye-watering $340 million. To put this in perspective, Pfizer's contributions accounted for over 51% of the Times' entire advertising revenue. What does this mean in practical terms? Every morning, when editors and journalists step into the New York Times building, they do so under the shadow of Pfizer's influence. The company's logo is not just a fleeting advertisement on the pages. They see it in their offices, feel its weight in their paychecks, and recognize it in the rent for the space they occupy. Pfizer's money is deeply intertwined with the very infrastructure that produces the news they deliver. Yet, paradoxically, these same journalists are expected to deliver independent and unbiased reporting on health issues, including vaccines developed by Pfizer itself. This creates an undeniable conflict of interest. How can journalism remain impartial when the primary financial backer is a giant pharmaceutical corporation? The situation is no different at CNN, a major global news network. Its health programs, which collectively air approximately 36 hours of content annually, are overwhelmingly sponsored by Johnson & Johnson. The pharmaceutical giant invests around $290 million every year to sponsor these shows. At the forefront of CNN's health reporting is Dr. Sanjay Gupta, who serves as the network's health editor. But there's more to his role than meets the eye. Gupta runs a consulting company, and the largest client of that company is none other than Johnson & Johnson. The income from this relationship is substantial. Gupta reportedly earns $1.8 million annually through this consultancy. Yet, he remains one of the key figures providing objective information about COVID-19 vaccines on national television. The question that naturally arises is, how objective can his reporting be when his financial interests are so closely linked to the very companies he covers? The British Broadcasting Corporation (BBC), long regarded as a pillar of impartial reporting, also faces similar conflicts, particularly in its global health coverage. The BBC's global health section is significantly funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which provides an annual budget of approximately $180 million. Editors working within this section regularly attend the Gates Foundation's strategy meetings. It's not merely a funding arrangement. It's a direct influence on the editorial agenda. The foundation helps shape which health stories receive coverage, focusing primarily on those that highlight the successes of its own projects and investments in Africa. News about African health developments often boils down to a marketing campaign for Gates Foundation initiatives, rather than balanced or investigative reporting. Rupert Murdoch's vast media empire employs even more overt methods to control information. His holdings include Fox News, The Wall Street Journal, The Sun, The Times, and Sky News, all firmly under his influence. Murdoch's personal wealth, estimated at $17.1 billion, affords him unparalleled power in shaping public discourse. He strategically invests in biotechnology and pharmaceutical companies to protect and grow his financial interests. Among his significant holdings are 1.2% of Pfizer shares, 8% of Moderna's, and 2.1% of GlaxoSmithKline's GSK stock. Through his media outlets, Murdoch provides news that is anything but neutral. It safeguards and promotes his substantial investments in the pharmaceutical industry. What I am about to reveal is dangerous. It could cost me my life. But I can no longer remain silent, not after seeing the devastating impact of these systems. I cannot forget Aminata, a young girl left paralyzed by the reckless vaccine trials conducted in Africa. I cannot erase the image of her fragile body in a wheelchair, or the despair in her mother's eyes. Aminata is not just a statistic or a name in a report. She embodies the countless victims of a system that exploits our people for profit. This exploitation ends now. I am not merely a military officer. I am a president, a symbol of resistance. I stand as Africa's voice of rebellion against a system that has abused us for far too long. Today I declare that Burkina Faso, Malawi, Niger, Chad, Mali, Guinea, Senegal, and Benin are united in a historic commitment: the signing of the Africa Health Freedom Pact. This pact outlines a new path forward for the continent. Article 1: Experimental drug testing on African soil is unequivocally banned. No more will our people be used as unwitting subjects in dangerous pharmaceutical trials. Article 2: Every blood sample, every DNA sample taken from our children will require explicit permission from the communities and governments concerned. Our bodies are not to be used as commodities without consent. Article 3: Our genetic data is our own. It will no longer be extracted and sent overseas for exploitation. African data stays in Africa. Article 4: Big pharmaceutical company laboratories operating on our lands will be shut down. We reject foreign control of our health infrastructure. Article 5: We will establish the Africa Drug Agency, a sovereign body dedicated to producing our own medicines, vaccines, and health solutions. No longer will our children be guinea pigs for foreign corporations. We are taking back control. Our lands will cease to be laboratories, and our people will no longer be treated as test subjects. Africa will become a hub of research, innovation, and production, driven by African scientists for African needs. Within 1 year, the Africa Drug Agency will be operational, with its headquarters in Ouagadougou. A budget of $5 billion will be allocated, with 54 countries contributing to this initiative. Within 5 years, we will produce our own vaccines for malaria, HIV, tuberculosis, and more. Vaccines that will be developed, tested, and approved in Africa for Africa. Within a decade, Africa will have a powerful voice on the global stage. African pharmaceutical companies will export medicines to Europe and America. We declare to the world that Africa is no longer the colony of Big Pharma. Our children are not laboratory rats. Our data is not for sale. Our health is not a commodity. I have unmasked their deceit. I have revealed their lies. I have dismantled their system. And Aminata, now 12 years old, still cannot walk, but she goes to school. She learns mathematics and computer science. Last month she told me, "Brother Ibrahim, no one can deceive us anymore because you told everyone the truth. Now we are safe. Yes, we are safe. This is why I fight. For Aminata, for all our children, for the future of Africa. The truth has been spoken and the truth will set us free. Now we are free."